Good morning, everyone. Now we are recording. So we are starting a bit late, but it's all right. I don't want to rush this last week, anyways. So, just to remind you, in the last lecture, we were discussing the problem of counting the number of perfect matchings. And in particular, I mentioned that due to a result of Valiant from 1979, unless P is equal to NP, there is no polynomial time algorithm to count the number of perfect matchings in a graph, right? So there is no efficient algorithm for those of you who are probably not from the theoretical CS side. Okay. And this kind of makes sense because we also discussed that in cubic graphs that are two connected, there are exponentially many perfect matchings. So if you have an exponential number of perfect matchings, intuitively, it doesn't seem that you can count them in polynomial time, right? Okay. And I mentioned that this problem was relevant to theoretical physics folks, especially in statistical mechanics. They call it the dimer problem, but basically it is counting perfect matchings in special types of graphs. Okay, so the more general problem is counting perfect matchings in all graphs, right? And in context of the dimer problem, physicists introduced the notion of Pfaffian graphs, which are these special graphs where you can compute the number of perfect matchings in polynomial time, because it basically reduces to computing a determinant of a matrix, which you can do efficiently by Gaussian elimination. Okay, so today we will define Pfaffian graphs. I did not define it in the last lecture. And then we also noticed that if we want to count the number of perfect matchings, we don't need to look at all graphs in the world. We can restrict our attention to graphs that are connected and every single edge belongs to some perfect matching. Okay, these are called matching covered graphs. Okay, so for most of this last week, we will restrict ourselves to matching covered graphs. Okay, good. So with that, let's go to Pfaffian graphs. Let's start today's lecture. Okay, so we are going to discuss this concept. First, I want to tell you what is an orientation of a graph. So let's just start with one example. Can someone tell me what is this graph? You all know this graph quite well. K33. Thank you, Anand. Right, so this is indeed K33. I'm going to remove one edge and make it a planar graph. Okay, I'll explain why later. So let's look at K33 minus one edge, which is a planar graph. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to put directions on the edges to get a directed graph. Now, I regret never discussing directed graphs before, but it's not going to matter too much. I'm sure you all have seen directed graphs in previous courses. So let's take an orientation of this graph, which means for every edge, I'm going to put a direction. Okay, let me call this D1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the directions as follows. Let me also put numbers on the vertices so that it's easier to see things. So this on the outside, let me make it like this: 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 1. Let me make it 4 to 5 and 2 to 5, and 1 to 6 and 6 to 3. Okay, I'll explain why I'm doing this. So this is called an orientation of the original graph G, right? So we get a directed graph with the same number of arcs as the number of edges in the original graph. Okay. So in a directed graph, these edges are generally called arcs. And for an arc, this vertex is called the tail and this vertex is called the head. Okay, so if the direction is from U to V, then U is the tail and V is the head. Okay, good. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to take a perfect matching in the original graph and I want to give a sign, either +1 or -1, to this perfect matching based on the directions in the graph D1. Okay, so I'm basically telling you about an idea of how you can count the number of perfect matchings in a graph. Okay, so just stay with me. So what we will do is we will define the sign of the perfect matching M1 under the orientation D1. Okay, so with respect to this orientation, we are going to give a sign to this perfect matching. And M1 is the perfect matching 1, 5. Sorry, not 1, 5. It is 1, 2, 4, 5, and 3, 6. Okay, the red perfect matching. So the sign of this perfect matching is going to be the sign of the following permutation. Okay, and I will explain to you what the sign of a permutation is in case you are not familiar. So the sign of this perfect matching is going to be, I'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the first row. And now I want to fill up the second row to get a permutation of this. Okay. So how am I going to do this? I'm going to take any edge of the edge M1. So let's say I take the edge 1, 2. So if you look at the orientation, 1 is the tail and 2 is the head. So I will write down 1 and 2. This is my first edge of the perfect matching. Okay. Now I'll take the second edge. The order in which I take the edges does not matter. That you can think about on your own. Okay. So now look at the second edge, 4, 5. So in the orientation, 4 is the tail and 5 is the head. So I'll put 4 first and 5 later. Okay. And finally, there is the edge 3, 6, which is going from 6 to 3 in the orientation. So 6 is the tail and 3 is the head. Okay. So I get a permutation of the vertices of the graph. What is a permutation? 1 maps to 1, 2 maps to 2, 3 maps to 4, 4 maps to 5, 5 maps to 6, 6 maps to 3, right? This is one way of writing down a permutation. And what is the sign of a permutation? Well, here is one way to compute the sign of a permutation. Draw these lines. So maybe I will use a different color. Maybe I will use green, or maybe I think I'll use orange. Okay, so how do you compute the sign of a permutation? You draw these small lines here, 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, 5 to 5, and 6 to 6. And look at how many intersection points there are. 1 point of intersection, 2 points, and 3 points. Does everybody see that? And now the sign of the permutation is -1 to the power 3, because there are 3 crossings, 3 intersections. Another way to think about this, well, the formal way of defining it is called the number of inversions. So what is an inversion? An inversion is a point where I is mapped to j, and right, so yeah, I is mapped to j, and how do I define this? So what has happened is 3 and 4 have been inverted. So 3 is now being mapped to 3, which is coming later here. So maybe I will, how do I define this? Let me think about this. Right. I is being mapped to j, and j is being mapped to I, where I is less than j. Okay, so that is an inversion in a permutation. But if you don't want to think about that, just draw this picture and look at the number of points where crossings occur. Okay, this is an easier way to think about the sign of a permutation. Okay, so this is a sign of the perfect matching M1 with respect to the orientation D1. Is this clear? Are there any questions about how we are computing the sign of a perfect matching? So sign of a perfect matching with respect to an orientation D1. That's how you compute it. Okay. So now let's write down the sign of another perfect matching, M2. So what is M2? Let me put it in blue color. It's 3 to 4, it's 2 to 5, and 1 to 6. Okay, so now I want to write down the sign of this perfect matching with respect to the same orientation. So M2 is 3 to 4, 2 to 5, and 1 to 6. 3 to 4, 2 to 5, and 1 to 6. Okay. And what is the sign of this one? The sign of M2 with respect to D1 is the sign of the following permutation. So I'll take the edge 3, 4. And what is the direction? 3 is going to 4. 3, 4, 2, 5, and 1, 6. So 3 is going to 4, 2 is going to 5, and 1 is going to 6. So I will write them down in that order. 3 is going to 4, 1 is going to 5, and 2 is going to 6. Is that right? Sorry, my bad. 2 is going to 5, and 1 is going to 6. Okay, so these are the arcs in our directed graph. Okay, and what is the sign of this permutation? Well, let's just do the same thing as before. Let's count the number of inversions. And one way to do that is making this drawing. 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, 5 to 5, and 6 to 6. And how many points of intersection do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You need to draw carefully so that you don't miss any intersection points. Okay. So this is a sign of the permutation, -1 to the power 6, right? And that is a +1. What I want you to note is that the sign of M1 is -1 and the sign of M2 is +1 with respect to the orientation D1. Okay, so note that in our example, sign of M1 with respect to D1 is not equal to the sign of M1, sorry, the sign of M2 with respect to the same orientation, right? This one is a -1 and this one is a +1. Okay. Any questions or concerns regarding how we are computing the sign of a perfect matching with respect to an orientation? All right. If not, now I want to take another orientation. But don't worry, we won't spend too much time on this. So let's keep the orientation the same as the original orientation. I will just change the direction of one edge. Okay. And that edge is going to be 3, 6. So everything else, I will keep it the same. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 and 6. And the directions are the same as the original one, except in the edge 3, 6. So the change is here. So maybe I'll put double arrow here just to show that there is a change here. Okay. This is the only change. So can someone tell me what is going to be the sign of M1 and M2 with respect to this new orientation? Notice that all the directions are the same except for the edge 3, 6. So can someone tell me how are the signs going to change for M1 and M2?
They'll flip.
Both of them will flip or one of them will flip? You're right. One of them will flip for sure. But my question is, are they both going to flip or is only one of them going to flip? I'll give you a hint. The edge that is changing direction, 3, 6, belongs to the red matching, but it does not belong to the blue matching. So will the blue matching sign change?
No, sir.
Right. So the blue one will not change because the edge which is changed does not belong to the blue matching. But the red one will flip the sign. Okay. So I will not do the computation because it's boring. I will just write it down and you can verify it yourself and think about why this is happening. Okay. So note that, or maybe I'll say do it yourself. The sign of M1 with respect to D2, the new orientation, is going to flip. However, the sign of M2 with respect to D2, let me just make sure, M1 is the red perfect matching, so that should switch. Right, and the blue one will not switch. It will remain +1. And in particular, both of them will now have the same sign. Okay? Is this kind of making sense? Right? Do you see why the sign of M1 will not change? Because none of the edges in M1, their directions have not changed. So M1 is not going to be affected. And in M2, you have flipped only one edge, the direction of one edge. So the number of inversions, if you think about it, will change exactly by 1. So if you had -1 to the power 3 before, now you will have -1 to the power 2 or 4. Okay. Since 3, 6 belongs to M2, sorry, belongs to M1, and it does not belong to M2. Okay. And another thing I want you to verify on your own is that the graph G has 4 perfect matchings. If you just think about it, you will see it easily. G has 4 perfect matchings. And what I want you to verify is that for all the 4 perfect matchings, the signs are the same in the orientation D2, all four perfect matchings of the graph G have the same sign with respect to the orientation D2. So it's not just M1 and M2. If you pick any other perfect matching of this graph, it will have the sign +1 in this orientation. Okay? We are going to call such an orientation a Pfaffian orientation. This is a Pfaffian orientation. So an orientation of a graph G is an assignment of directions to each edge of G, right? So you will get a directed graph, and more importantly, an orientation. Well, that's not what I'm defining. An orientation D of a graph G is a Pfaffian orientation. And because I don't want to write such a long thing every time, I will just call it P dot O dot. Okay. An orientation is a Pfaffian orientation if the sign of M1 is equal to the sign of M2 for any two perfect matchings of the graph G. Okay. So in particular, D1 is not a Pfaffian orientation. D1 is not a Pfaffian orientation in our example. Okay, because you've got two perfect matchings whose signs are different. All right, so good. Lots of technicalities. Why do we care? So here is the main reason why people care about Pfaffian orientations. And this I will not be proving, but I might give you a reference to look at if you are interested in reading the proof. It's basically a bunch of algebra. Okay, so I'll state it as a fact. And I will try to focus more on the graph theoretical aspects because I don't want to spend time on algebraic facts and miss out on the graph theoretical aspects of the subject. So the fact is that given a Pfaffian orientation D of a graph G, you can compute the determinant of a certain matrix. So I need to tell you what this determinant is, or what this matrix is. If you compute the determinant of the adjacency matrix of this directed graph, so I will explain to you that in a few seconds, what you will get is the number of perfect matchings of the graph squared, right? And computing determinant is easy. So by computing the determinant, you will get the square of the number of perfect matchings. So then, of course, you can get the number of perfect matchings, right? So whenever a graph has a Pfaffian orientation, because of this fact, you can compute the number of perfect matchings in polynomial time. So the main consequence is if a graph G has a Pfaffian orientation, then you can compute number of perfect matchings of the graph G in polynomial time or efficiently. Okay. So what is this adjacency matrix of the directed graph? Perhaps some of you have already seen this stuff. but I will tell you anyways what it is. So let's look at the second orientation. Okay. So I want to tell you what this adjacency matrix is. So let's look at D, and let me put D as D2 in our example, right? So I will draw it again. So if I remember correctly, all of these are going like this: 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. 4 is going to 5, 2 is going to 5, and 1 is going to 6, and 3 is going to 6. Okay. That's D2. So what you would do in this case to get the adjacency matrix. So, well, I never defined adjacency matrices for graphs, but I'm pretty sure you've seen it in previous courses. So what you do is you put the vertices as your rows and as columns. Okay, so index the rows and columns by vertices. Okay, let me just make lines here to make it clear. All right, so I will look at a pair u comma v of vertices. There are three possibilities. Well, the three possibilities are, well, first of all, if u is equal to v, let's just put a 0 in all those places, right? So the diagonal is going to be bunch of zeros, right? So for two distinct vertices u and v, the three possibilities are either they are not connected by an edge, or u is the tail and v is the head, or u is the head and v is the tail, right? So the easiest case is when they are not connected. In that case, I'm going to put the entries of the matrix as 0. Okay, so one example here is 1 and 3. They are not connected by an edge. So I would put a 0 here and a 0 here. Okay. Now if u is the tail and v is the head, then I will put AUV is equal to +1 and AVU is equal to -1. Right? So in the example, we have 1 to 2. 1 is the tail and 2 is the head. So I'm going to put a +1 in this entry and a -1 in this entry. Right? And of course, in the other case, I'm going to put a VU as a +1 and a UV as a -1. Right? So one example here would be 3, 6, or let's say, yeah, sure. So in the case of 3, 6, 3 is the tail and 6 is the head. So again, I'm going to put a +1 here and I'm going to put a -1 here, right? Sorry, 6, 3. That's going to be 6, 3. Right? So you get the idea. You're going to get a skew symmetric matrix. So this is a skew symmetric matrix. Okay. So I'm sure you can all fill this out. And what you can do is you can find your favorite determinant calculator online and check that in this example, the determinant of this matrix is exactly 16, which is 4 squared, because 4 is the number of perfect matchings in your undirected graph, right? Okay. So for this fact, I will probably give you a reference on Piazza in case you are interested in reading a proof, right? So let me just call this an algebraic fact. Okay, good. Any questions or concerns regarding anything we've discussed so far?
Sir, does every
Yeah.
graph have a Pfeiffer orientation?
Great. That is exactly what we are coming to. So, what do you think? What's your guess?
I think yes, sir. I mean the planar ones.
Planar ones, yes. So that is actually true. These physicists in the 1960s, they not only defined Pfaffian orientations, they also proved that all planar graphs are Pfaffian. And if I am not mistaken, they only cared about planar graphs. So by doing this, they actually solved the dimer problem in physics, right? So all planar graphs are Pfaffian. Unfortunately, not all graphs are Pfaffian. Okay. Um, so I use the word graph is Pfaffian. So let me just put that. So first of all, not all graphs admit or have a Pfaffian orientation. The smallest example, which we will prove, don't worry, is K33. K33 is not Pfaffian, does not have a Pfaffian orientation. We will say that a graph G is Pfaffian if G admits a Pfaffian orientation. Okay? So in particular, K33 is non-Pfaffian. And Castelline in 1963, one of the people who introduced Pfaffian orientations, he proved that all planar graphs are Pfaffian. Right? This means, so just to tell you another fact, if you know that a graph is Pfaffian, then actually you can find a Pfaffian orientation efficiently, which means then you can find your matrix and you can compute the determinant and you can compute the number of perfect matchings. So what this means is that in the case of planar graphs, one may efficiently, in polynomial time, compute the number of perfect matchings. Okay. But unfortunately, because all graphs are not Pfaffian, the idea introduced by the physicists does not help to compute number of perfect matchings in all graphs. Right. So we are still stuck there. But well, there is not much hope there because we already know that unless P is equal to NP, you cannot compute the number of perfect matchings for all graphs in polynomial time. So let's just forget that for now, right? There is not much hope there. Let's instead focus on the question asked by Surya. How do you convince someone, or how do you decide whether a graph is Pfaffian? So of course, if the graph is planar, it is Pfaffian. The problem is, in the case of non-planar graphs, a graph may be Pfaffian, may not be Pfaffian, right? So that is the problem. Right. So this is actually an open problem. As of now, we don't know any polynomial time algorithm to decide whether an arbitrary graph is Pfaffian or not. Okay. In fact, but don't worry, there are results. We are going to discuss some results. We are going to prove some things. So we will prove Castelline's theorem soon, today or in the next lecture. And another interesting question is, how do you convince someone that a graph is Pfaffian or non-Pfaffian? So if you remember, when we were discussing planarity and many other concepts, we had these kinds of questions. How do you convince someone that a graph is planar or it is not planar? In most of these questions, one of the answers was easy. For example, how do you convince someone that a graph is planar? Well, you show them a planar embedding, you're done, right? The more difficult question is, how do you convince someone that a graph is non-planar? Then Krutowski's theorem comes and helps us, because by Krutowski's theorem, there is always a K5 or K33 subdivision. So you show the person that subdivision, and that means that the graph is non-planar, right? Interestingly, in this particular question, neither of them is clear. Supposing you want to convince someone that a graph is Pfaffian, what does that mean? That means that you have to find an orientation. So let's say you got this orientation, you show the orientation to the person. The problem is there could be exponentially many perfect matchings. So you have to count the signs of, you have to compute the signs of each perfect matching, and you have to check that they are all +1 or they are all -1, right? But how do you do this? How do you check the signs of all perfect matchings in polynomial time or quickly, right? So it's not easy to convince someone that a graph is Pfaffian. And at the same time, it's not immediately clear. How do you convince someone that a graph is not Pfaffian? How do you convince someone that no matter how you orient the edges, there will always be two perfect matchings whose signs are not the same? So if you just go by the definition, then it's not clear how you would convince someone that a graph is Pfaffian or that it is non-Pfaffian. Okay, so I just want to point out that the definition of Pfaffian graphs is complex enough that both of these questions do not admit easy answers. Okay, so not clear from the definition, right? So what I mean is, if you want to do this, you need some theorems. If you just use the definition, then it's not clear how you would do this.
Sir, I had a question here.
Yeah, go ahead, Surya.
Sir, so even in case of like showing whether a graph is planar or not, so say the graph is non-planar, then we'll have to use Krutowski's theorem to show that there exists a K33 or K5 subdivision. But isn't is finding that a
Right.
hard problem or?
Right. It's, well, the answer is no. So we did not discuss algorithms in this course, but you are mixing up two slightly different issues here. So let me think about it this way. Let's see. Yeah, so this is, I mean, I don't want to use theoretical CS terms here because you may not be familiar with them. So I don't know if you're familiar. If you are, let me know, then I can answer this more rigorously at the end of the lecture. Are you familiar with these terms NP, co-NP, and P by any chance? I don't expect you to be because you're not from the typical CS background.
Yes, sir, but I don't remember exactly
Okay.
what is co-NP.
Oh, I see. Okay. Maybe I will take a few minutes. So we are basically at the end of the lecture. So maybe I'll take a few minutes to go over these definitions and give you a more precise answer, right? But okay, so let me try to go over it quickly. So in theoretical computer science, you have decision problems, right? So it would look like this: decide whether graph G is, let's go to planarity. It's something easier to deal with. Planar. Okay. So for these decision problems, you can say whether the decision problem belongs to NP or it belongs to co-NP or it belongs to P. Okay. I will explain what it means to say this. So for a decision problem to belong to NP, It means that, so yeah, this is a bit of aside. So this is not part of the regular syllabus or anything. Belongs to NP means that the yes instances. What do I mean by a yes instance? A graph is a yes instance in this example if it is planar, right? So the question is the graph planar? You would say yes. So in this example, the yes instances are planar graphs. So if a yes instance admits a polynomial time verifiable certificate. So what do I mean by this term here? So in the example of planarity, if you want to convince someone that a graph is planar, then you can show them a planar embedding. And they can verify this in polynomial time. They can verify in polynomial time that the embedding is indeed a planar embedding. Okay, so this can be done, trust me. Intuitively, it makes sense. If I give you a planar drawing, you should be able to look at it and check that it's planar or not. Okay. Belongs to co-NP means that no instances admit a polynomial time verifiable certificate. Okay. Verifiable certificate. So what do I mean by this? It's the same as before. In the case of planar graphs, the no instances are non-planar graphs, right? Is the graph planar? If it is non-planar, you would say no. So that's a no instance. So in the case of planarity, because of Krutowski's theorem, whenever a graph is non-planar, there exists a subdivision of K5 or K33 in that graph. So that means that you can show that certificate to the person and they can verify in polynomial time that it is indeed a subdivision of K5 or K33 and it is a subgraph of the given graph, right? So this is clear that it should be, this can be checked. Whether a graph is a subdivision of K5 or K33 can be checked in polynomial time. Okay. So because of Krutowski's theorem, this is also, this problem is in co-NP. Due to Krutowski's theorem, there exists a subdivision of K5 or K33 in any non-planar graph. And this subdivision is a polynomial time verifiable certificate. Notice that the definition of co-NP is not saying anything about finding that certificate in polynomial time. It is just saying that there exists a certificate that can be verified in polynomial time. So it's not asking you to find the certificate in polynomial time. Okay. And the strongest class among these three is the class P. So what is P? P means that so the problem belongs to P if the decision whether a graph is planar or non-planar can be made in polynomial time. Now, if I want to be really, really precise, I should say on a deterministic Turing machine, but don't worry about that too much. I just want to be precise, so I'm stating it here. But if you don't know what Turing machines are, just don't worry about it. Okay, so if you can make the decision in polynomial time, whether a graph is planar or not, then the decision problem would be in P. And intuitively, if you can make the decision, you should also be able to find the certificate. So P is actually a subset of NP intersection co-NP. Because to make the decision, you need to be able to tell whether the graph is planar or it is not planar. If it is planar, you should be able to find the certificate in polynomial time. Otherwise, how do you know that the graph is planar? And in the same sense, in the same spirit, if it is non-planar, you should be able to find the certificate, so subdivision of K5 or K33 in polynomial time, right? So intuitively, this is true, and even formally, you can prove this. If you go through all the definitions rigorously, you can show that P is a subset of NP intersection co-NP. Okay, so by Krutowski's theorem, we know that the planarity problem belongs to co-NP, belongs to co-NP due to Krutowski. It belongs to it belongs to NP um, due to um, easy results. Let me just state that. If you want to go into details, I can go into that. Right? But the idea is that you just show a planar embedding to a person and they will be convinced that the graph is planar. And in this particular case, the problem is also in polynomial time, but this needs an algorithm, right? Which we are not discussing in this course. So I'll just say out of syllabus, right? If you're interested, you can look at my previous courses recordings, and there we discuss an algorithm for planarity. But does this make sense? So what I'm saying is that due to Krutowski's theorem, the decision problem is in co-NP. But it's not in P because of Krutowski's theorem. So you are right. Krutowski's theorem does not tell you how to find the subdivision of K5 or K33. It just tells you that there exists a subdivision of K5 or K33, and that is why the problem is in co-NP. Does that make sense? Surya?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. So have I answered your question then? I
Yes,
went
sir.
into too many details, but I just thought I'll take the time to explain these details. Okay. So, but anyways, all of this stuff, NP, co-NPP is not part of this course, right? But that is how you formalize these questions. Okay. So in the case of Pfaffian orientations, it is not clear whether the problem is in NP or in co-NP if you just look at the definition. So to prove either of them, you need to prove some additional theorems, like Krutowski's theorem, similar to that. Okay. I don't remember the exact status. If I'm not mistaken, one of them is true. Either the problem is in NP or in co-NP, but I don't think it is in both, or it is not known to be in both. I will check this and let you know in the next lecture, right? But by the definition, it's not at all clear why the problem should be in NP or in co-NP. So what we are going to do next is, just to give you a quick heads up about the next lecture, we will discuss alternative and equivalent definitions of Pfaffian orientations. Some of these definitions are easier to work with. So rather than looking at the definition we went through, we will switch to these other definitions and we will work with them. Okay? They are more graph theoretical and less algebraic. That is another reason to switch to them. Okay? Good. Any questions or concerns? We are way beyond the lecture time, but I'm here for another 3 minutes or so. So feel free to ask any questions or concerns. Okay, so I'll stop recording.